All right, welcome, welcome. We are just getting started here, just a few minutes behind schedule, but that is sometimes how life goes here in the military. I am Heather Campbell. I am our workshop facilitator, and I am currently on solo parent ops today, which is what we call it in my family when my service member is gone or when I'm out of town, because we don't call it single parenting, because single parents do this all the time and have it down to an art, which I do not have. So with that, there's full disclaimer that we might see a tiny human come into the screen, and that is part of life today. Let me go ahead and get some screen sharing going so that we can see. You should have received a copy of the workbook for tonight's workshop so that you should have that handy. If not, we've got that link being dropped into the chat. You can also email us. I've got some slides that are very similar to the workshop, so you'll be able, or to the workbook, excuse me, so you'll be able to see those as we go along, and this will hopefully, here we go. Of course, now it'll take a minute, so there we go. Okay, so I've got these slides. This is going to help us be able to see as we move through our workshop today. Now, first slide here, this is the Fuel the Homefront workshop presented by InDependent. We have catered this class to be around a time that is convenient for our Pacific friends out near JBLM in response to an event by Military Family Advisory Network, some very dear colleagues of ours who wanted to help promote our event, and we wanted to help support theirs. So that is where you are finding this time on this particular day and who we are here at InDependent. Now, what we're going to do today I'm skipping. Nope. Our agenda, we're going to do a little bit of intro and background, both on InDependent and myself. Then we're going to talk sort of part one. It says 2 here, but part 1 of the curriculum will be how to stretch the groceries. And then that second part is going to be the basics of healthy eating. So what do we need to know when it actually comes to what we should be feeding our families? Here at InDependent, our mission is to make wellness accessible and create opportunities for all military spouses to connect for friendship, accountability, and inspiration. And here with the Fuel the Homefront workshop, our goal is to connect military community members with available resources offered by the Department of Defense, nonprofits, and other organizations, as well as empower them to maximize their grocery budget. And the reason, we're going to get into it just in a minute, but the reason that we wanted to bring this workshop to you guys, the reason that we wanted to have all of this specifically put together is because we have noticed that there is a lack of resource that really pulls in the specifics of inflation, the specifics of finance when it comes to how do we feed our families. And so we wanted to make that available to everybody who attends the workshop and say, here's the specifics of how you do that in relation to groceries and record inflation and the price of groceries climbing like we are seeing. Okay, we'll get to that in just a minute. Quick about me. I don't think that we have it on a slide, which is fine, but you'll see it in your workbook. Quick about me. My name is Heather Campbell. I am a registered dietitian by trade. My background is in pediatric and family nutrition. I am a volunteer here as part of the InDependent team. I'm a mom of 3 and an Air Force spouse, and I am an accidental advocate for military families who are facing food insecurity. And I'm a family meal expert, and I currently live in Alaska. So I am way up here in the far north where it is snowy and not warm by some comparison of standards, but for us, it's actually pretty warm. We're in the teens today. So I am happy to be well above 0. That's what we call it when we're, double digits above 0 is where I am located. Now, why are we going to be talking about family meals? I've got a little bit of data. You're going to see it there in your workbook. This would be, I believe, on the 3rd page of your workbook. I've got one next to me, so I'm making sure we're keeping track of our pages. But per the National Center on Addiction and Substance Abuse, this is called CASA, at Columbia University, children, this is research that they did, children who eat dinner with their parents are less likely to smoke, drink, or use illicit drugs. Also from CASA, adolescents and young adults who seek treatment for depression, anxiety, and other problems are half as likely as their peers to eat meals with their families. So on one side, children who are eating with their families are less likely to do some of these worrisome behaviors, but also those who are seeking help for mental health support, they are half as likely as their peers to have been eating with their families. So we know that when it comes to mental health, when it comes to behavior with our children and within our families, there is definitely a link there with eating together. Now, also the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, which is my governing agency as a registered dietitian, their research, one of their research studies found that children who join family dinners are more likely to eat fruit, vegetables, minerals, and other vitamins, and they are less likely to eat saturated fats, snacks, and sodas. So all that to say, when we are eating together as a family, our children are healthier, they are having better behaviors in general, and they are eating better, as are other members of the family. Now, one of the things that I find tricky in being a military family is that our circumstances are always changing. Our location is changing, whether or not our service member is home is changing, whether or not us as a military spouse, myself, whether or not I'm employed, where we live, what kind of house, all of those things, if we have community in a new location, or if we're, with old friends, all of that is always changing. But one of the things that is constant for us is our ability to gather our people around a meal and our ability to build relationships with the people at our table, whether that is a blended family, a single parent family, a non-traditional family, whatever that looks like. We have this opportunity to gather for breakfast or for lunch or for dinner. And that's why we use the terminology here at InDependent of family meals and not just family dinner, because the reality is sometimes it's not dinner. Sometimes the time that our family can all gather is that breakfast, or sometimes it's just on the weekends when we can get dinner together, whatever that looks like for your family. But we want to help empower you to have these tools in your toolbox so that you can know how to stretch those dollars, how to put food on the table, what kind of food to put on the table, so that ultimately you can be focusing on building those relationships with the people who are at your table. Now, you've heard me say a little bit about food insecurity already. And again, this is in your workbook. There's some stats there. But according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, food insecurity is a lack of consistent access for an active, healthy lifestyle for each member of the family. Now, it's not the same as hunger. Hunger is, like starving kids in Africa. Remember those commercials from when we were little, for this many cents a day. They probably still have them. I don't watch TV anymore, but those commercials of starving kids in Africa, right? Or in other countries. Hunger is not the same as food insecurity. Food insecurity is an economic status of just not knowing if your dollars are going to stretch far enough. And what we're finding in data, and this is something that multiple organizations have been looking at for a number of years, but in 2021, this is that third bullet point down, Military Family Advisory Network found that 1 in 5 military families were experiencing food insecurity. Also in 2022, so just a couple of months ago, the Department of Defense released their internal review, their data, and said, okay, we're going to look in on ourselves and see what we're seeing, because we've got these other organizations who are looking and they're finding these numbers. Let's see what we can find when we look within ourselves. And they actually found the highest rate of all. They found 24% of military families experiencing food insecurity, and that was all data that was pre-2022. So this was pre-Russia invading Ukraine, pre-record inflation, pre-grocery inflation. By the time the data is released, analyzed and released, and everything is ready, it's already old data when it comes out. And that's the same for any clinical data or anything like that you see. So this data is all based on 2021 numbers, even though it's our 2022 release. So there's potential that that number is lower or higher, but this is based on, kind of last year's picture, if you will, but they found 1 in 4 families. So this is definitely something we're seeing in the military community. And per MFAN, that last bullet point there, many of the factors that lead to food insecurity can happen at any rank, and we'll talk about those in just a minute, but it is more likely to happen. It's 5 times more likely to happen in our enlisted families than our officer families. So I have seen it all through the spectrum of, upper enlisted, and I've seen it in officer families. It can happen to anybody for different life circumstances, but I wanted to give you guys a little bit of background of what is this. If you hear us saying food insecurity or how to stretch those dollars, it kind of comes from this desire of, well, we have this problem that's being identified in research, but how can we help? What can we do at InDependent to bring our resources and our knowledge into our community and make that available to you guys? Turn my page on my notes. I don't want to miss anything that I've written in the margins. I'm one of those people that writes my notes and then I go back and add little things in the margins. One of the most interesting things, I didn't have this on the slide, according to an MFAN, so the same organization, one of their studies in 2019, service members experiencing food insecurity stated, I'm reading this so I don't miss it, that they sought assistance from family members and community organizations like food pantries. They skipped meals, incurred more credit card debt, and even found additional jobs. Things that these service members experiencing it were not doing. They were not going to their first sergeants. They were not going to their command. They were not using base resources because of stigma. So this is definitely something that we're hearing is happening, and military families don't feel comfortable going to local resources. So we are bringing the resources to you so that you know where to go, what to do, and how to maximize what's available. Okay, now this first part that we're going to talk about, oh, actually, I want to back up. Let me go back to my other slide. A little bit about these causal factors. This is the bottom of that page talking about food insecurity. I have them listed in a paragraph for you there, but there are lots of different reasons that food insecurity can happen. And there's multiple listed there, but there's 4 that MFAN found consistently in their data when they said, why is this happening? You know, hey, family that's experienced this, tell us what was the tipping point for you? What was the tipping point for this family? What was the tipping point for this one? And the 4 causal factors they found is a recent PCS, a lack of spouse employment or underemployment, so spouse unemployment or underemployment, growing your family, so whether that's adding a spouse, adding a dependent, adult dependent, child dependent, and then the last one is an unexpected financial expense. So, you know, maybe like buying 4 tires in the middle of a cross-country move, which is a joy that we had last summer. But also all of these causal factors, PCS, spouse unemployment, growing your family, you know, unexpected finances, that pretty much just sounds like military life on repeat. So we know that these things are regularly happening in our community and are putting these families at risk. Let me double check. I've got a few things popping up in the chat. Okay, perfect. And I want to make sure that I am not missing anything. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Melanie, for putting those links down there so that we can see that. All right, here we go. Next slide. PowerPoint. Nope, maybe I'll click it. There we go. Okay, now we're going to get into that first part of that curriculum. So now that you have a little bit of background of InDependent, me as your facilitator, and also sort of where this came from, this desire to bring this information in, now let's get right into it. First part is planning for groceries, knowing where to shop. Different things are different prices at different places. We all know that. How to watch the sales and ads, and then reducing waste. So these are ways that you can stretch your groceries. Is each one of these, we're going to get into more detail, but each one of these are ways that you can help stretch those dollars when it comes to your groceries. Now, here in the Fuel the Homefront workshop, we do not talk specifically of how to build a budget, how to talk to a financial planner, how to look at the money coming in and the money going out. That is not something that we offer through InDependent, although that is available free of charge on most military installations through resources that have been made available by Military OneSource or through your local installation support networks. So that is available, but not something that we do. What we're going to talk about is sort of assuming that you've either got that baseline budget or that you're familiar with what that's going to look like for your household, and how can we stretch it when it specifically comes to groceries. Now, first thing, knowing your budget. Now, again, like I said, you've got free on-base resources. I am an Air Force spouse, so we have something called the Military and Family Readiness Center. I know Navy has like Fleet and Family Services. Army has it through Army Community Services or through like their MWR services. So there's lots of different ways. It's called different things in different places, but we have this available. So you have to be aware of what those free resources are. And that even includes like free tax prep around tax season, or we're close to Veterans Day right now. So we see a lot of things sort of pop up as available for military and veteran families, but be familiar with those resources. There's also things like apps, websites. You could use Excel or Google Sheets, or, you know, Apple, their equivalent, I think, is Sheets, but you can use these different resources to help you know what those numbers look like. You could even use, you know, an old-fashioned pen and paper if you really prefer to have that method. Some people use like an envelope method to track their spending, but there's lots of ways that you can have it as simply as you want or as complex as you want. You can be as hands-on as you want or have it sort of done for you. I know that one, I think it's a website and an app, it's called Mint. I don't use it personally. I don't work for them. I can't endorse them, but I've heard of it, and it will sort of pop up with like a pie chart of it'll say, okay, Heather Campbell, here's where your dollars went this month. And I give it the logins to my my different accounts, and it'll just pull them all together and be like, this is how much you spent on Starbucks. For the record, I live out in the boonies and I don't have Starbucks near me. There's one, I think, in the grocery store. So that's not something in my spending, but you get the idea that, it can be something that simple as it pops up and tells you this is where your dollars are going, or it could be something that you're physically like divvying out paper dollars into envelopes. But you've got to know where you're starting from. Before you know how to stretch it, you have to know what you're working with in the beginning. Okay, step 2, or I guess sort of tip number 2 for stretching those groceries is planning for groceries. And you have to have a game plan. Now, this doesn't mean like meal prepping where you make all your food on Sunday. That doesn't mean that you're going to have everything go perfectly. Last week we had something planned and we had dinner, or we had cereal for dinner. And actually my 6-year-old made it. It was a really terrible day. Of course, my spouse was gone. And I said, okay, we're just doing cereal. And I was taking care of one of the other children. And my sweet 6-year-old daughter said, okay, I'll make dinner. It's just cereal. And I was like, great. You did a great job taking care of the family. Like, I appreciate it. Thank you. But you have to have a plan. We moved from Alabama to Alaska last year, and I know the general direction we needed to go, but I would not recommend like PCSing and just saying, well, let's head that direction and see how it goes, especially during a pandemic, driving through another country. That is not something that you should be doing. So you have to have a game plan of sort of where you're going to be going, knowing that you'll probably, end up using plan B and C and D. And as military families, we know to have lots of plans, but you want to at least have a general direction of where you want things to be going. Now, if you look in the appendix in the very back of your workbook, it's under Appendix C, there's something called the USDA Thrifty Food Plan. And I've put it here on this slide deck so that you can see it. But you can see that this is what the USDA is estimating that it costs to feed a family or to feed individuals for the weekly cost and monthly cost based on the September 2022 data. Now, you'll notice there's like a reference family down here at the bottom. That might differ. You hear it on the commercials, right? The little asterisk of like prices may vary in Alaska and Hawaii. If you are not stationed in the continental United States, the mainland, as they would say in Hawaii, here in Alaska, we call it the lower 48. But if you are not stationed in one of those places, your dollar amounts might look different. If you're stationed somewhere very affordable, like say Oklahoma or somewhere else in the Midwest or in the plains, your dollar amount might actually be very different than say Washington, DC or New York or California or the Seattle, Tacoma area. So this is an average over the entire continent. But what I want you to know here is this isn't a minimum or a maximum, but just a reference point. And this is what the USDA is saying, hey, to feed this individual of this age range and this person, this is how much it should cost us to feed them with food stamps, or what we call SNAP, which is Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, previously known as food stamps. So this is what they're saying is that reference point. So if you're wondering, how much should I be spending on groceries? This gives you that reference point to say, okay, this is around where we should be spending. Maybe we're over, maybe we're under, but it gives you an idea of sort of where those averages are. Now, what's interesting about, let's get that specific. Oh, here we go. If you go back and compare, I went and pulled the old USDA Thrifty Food Plans from other months. I went pre-21, pre-2020. Let's go all the way back to our last month before the pandemic, or really before we knew the pandemic was starting, to September 2019. And I pulled those numbers. Groceries have gone up in the last 3 years. Groceries alone have gone up 48%. 48%. So if you are noticing a difference in your grocery bill, it is not just because your children have grown or your family has grown. It is because it has actually gotten way, way, way more expensive to feed your family. So that's why I love including this Thrifty Food Plan to give you that reference point of what should it look like? What could it look like to feed these different members of my family? Okay, now, third way to stretch your groceries is knowing where to shop. And I put a couple of different food categories here of produce, dry goods, meat or fish, dairy, eggs, frozen, household items, and bulk. And full disclosure, here in Alaska, if and whenever I can, I get things online. I get them from Target. I get them from Amazon Prime. Things where I can get things for lower 48 prices and have them delivered to my door. Those are my favorite. But you will see in your workbook that I put a table in there. It looks, I don't think you guys, oh, you can still see me. It looks just like this. little table. And it has all of these different things listed of where you shop. And normally, if we have a very large group in our attendance or if we're in person, we'll go through and have everyone sort of chime in where the places are that they shop. And so this is something that you could even be asking your peers. Those of you who are catching this on replay, you can ask your neighbors, you can ask your coworkers, hey, where are you typically finding good produce, good quality produce, also for an affordable price? There's a difference between getting the best product out there and also getting a product that fits both, your desires for your family and your pocketbook. So I encourage you to take a couple of minutes, maybe as we're going through these slides, and be jotting down, where is it that you consistently go? I know here in Alaska, it can be really tricky to get quality produce affordably. So there are a few reliable places that I know, no matter what, they are putting quality produce out. Or I might go and they might just be out of that item because if it's not quality, they won't put it out. And that's our local Kroger distributor. And it's called Fred Meyer, which I think you guys have in the Seattle-Tacoma area as well. But Fred Meyer's pretty consistent for us. Commissaries can be hit or miss, which is tricky with distribution and shipping. We also have cost. Are the places I go for that. Other things like dry goods or household items or bulk items, you can get pretty much anywhere. You can get those, you can get some of these items at the BX or the commissary or Walmart or wherever, but there's going to be items like meat and eggs or meat and fish, dairy and eggs and produce that you're really going to want to pay attention to. Where can you get good quality groceries also for a price that you feel comfortable spending? So I encourage you, jot that down and ask your neighbors, ask your friends about where they're getting their food. One thing you could even do, if you have, a smartphone, there's an app. Google Sheets is Google's form of like Excel, and you can get the app, and so you can pull it up on your phone, you can pull it up on your computer, your iPad, wherever, and you could just make a table of, here's these items I know I'm buying regularly, right? When my kids were little, it was like diapers and wipes and kid-friendly snacks and that sort of thing, and have those, and then, okay, I know I'm going to regularly visit like Costco, the commissary, and Fred Meyer, and just sort of keep track of, okay, next time I'm at Fred Meyer, I'm going to write down how much that item is. And you could even do this if you really wanted. You could like look on websites or look up, but it's typically whenever I'm at a grocery store within that chart. So, and I typically do this anytime I move to a new location, and it's just those most commonly purchased items. So I can really start getting a feel for the new area and where is going to be the best place. Now that does take brain space because we've been a family in the past that has walked through food insecurity and has struggled with how to make all of those dollars stretch in the different places. This is something that's important to me when we move, is knowing where's going to be the best place. But if you've been in your place for an amount of time, if you're already familiar with that, or if it's just not something you're interested in, you don't have to do that. But that is an option of how to track what those best places are, is you could just, keep track of it somewhere on your phone that makes it easy, a little Google drop-down sheet. Okay. Next way to stretch those dollars is to pay attention to your sales and ads. So once you know what your budget looks like, once you have an idea of what kind of groceries you're buying, planning out those meals, what kind of foods do you want to be getting for your family, and we'll talk a little bit more about how to plan that out in the second part of this curriculum. But once you know what the budget looks like, what the groceries are going to look like, where you normally shop for what items, now you can start paying attention when sales and ads happen. I know for me in my local area, if I see the 3-pound container of bacon for $8.99, I'm buying it, because in Alaska, that is a steal. It's usually $8.99 per, not only like buy it for this week, but I'm going to get one for my freezer as well. Which is that first part there of watching for sales and ads. You want to know when to stock up. And when you're paying attention to those regular prices, it helps you understand and recognize when something's a good deal or when it's not a good deal. And also pay attention to cost breakdown on those price tags. One thing I noticed recently, I was at my grocery store and I went to go get the regular size milk, and they had the big jug. We do lactose free in my family. So I went to go get, the half gallon. And I was like, well, I'm going to get the big jug at the bottom because that's very clearly the better price. And when I looked at it, I thought, Wait, that doesn't make sense. If it's that price for that many ounces, and typically on the price tag, it'll have it listed, right in the bottom part of that box, like so many cents per ounce. And so I looked at it, and then I looked up at my half gallon. I was like, this is less per ounce. So actually, if I buy this one, it's still cheaper for me to get the 2 smaller containers than the 1 bigger one. So that's what I did, is I got the 2 smaller containers instead of the 1 big one. Now, that's not always the case, but it's something to pay attention to, especially if you typically go somewhere like a Costco or somewhere that has, case sales at your local grocery store. Knowing that just because it's in a bigger container, it's not always a better deal is really important. Even you see it on cereal. Cereal goes on sale and is only the certain size boxes. Well, I'd like to just get the big box. I have a family of 5. We'll go through the cereal. But if it's cheaper for me to get the one that's on sale and get 3 of the smaller boxes, then I guess I'm getting 3 of the smaller boxes this week, right? So pay attention to that cost breakdown on those price tags. Just not necessarily go and study the store, but when you're getting your regularly priced items, your regularly planned items, pay attention to if a different brand is on sale, or if the store brand, or maybe you always get the store brand, but the name brand is on sale. Just pay attention to those things. Make sure, fun fact, make sure that you are paying attention to your storage and your budget. It does not do you a lot of good if something's on sale and it empties out your bank account. So still be mindful, even if it's a good deal, still be respectful of where your dollars are going and what you really want to be spending at the store, and also where you can store it. Don't go, I recommend, don't go to Costco and get a bunch of freezer and fridge food and then try to drive it in your camper fridge and freezer. It's not a good idea. You're going to run out of space really quickly. So, if you're doing something like camping, maybe get more shelf-stable items like canned food and not things for the fridge and freezer. But that's just an example. Here in Alaska, there's a lot of hunting and fishing. We have a deep freeze to help preserve that food. Some people have the fridge and freezer combo. We don't. We just have a freezer. So I have to be mindful of what I'm buying for refrigerator space, because I have, a freezer and a half, but I don't have extra refrigerator space. Also, full disclaimer, yes, I've put food outside to keep it good before, because I live in Alaska. So I kind of live in a fridge. But point being, make sure that you know where you're going to be storing your food before you go stock up on something that's on sale. You don't want to get home and find out you don't have a way to keep this food good, and now you're throwing it away and ultimately losing dollars. And then also where to get assistance. This is in Appendix D in the back part of that workbook as well. I put in a breakdown. I don't have the slide for it, but there's a breakdown of WIC eligibility, I believe. Yes, it's Appendix D. It looks like this, if you can see that. I know you can't read it in the slides, but it's just a breakdown, and it will say on there for the lower 48 or contiguous, 48 contiguous DC, Guam, and territories, and there's a different bracket for Alaska and a different bracket for Hawaii. And that's a great way for you to know sort of where you stand. Are you eligible? WIC always, this is women, infants, and children. It's a supplemental nutrition program for women, infants, and children. They always use base pay, and they always use your BAS if you're a military family. Some states use your, say, BAH, your housing allowance. Some states don't. Some states count COLA, for example, if you live overseas. So it's always a good idea to contact your local office and see what they're using. And unfortunately, it does vary state to state. I don't love that it varies state to state. That is something through the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and that's set by Congress. There is some traction and some conversation happening of, hey, we shouldn't be using housing allowance. We shouldn't be using COLA, that kind of thing to determine food money, but that's where we are. So just be aware of where you can get assistance in your local community through things like WIC. If you are overseas, not Alaska and Hawaii, but truly, in another country, then the Women, Infant, and Children Nutrition Program is actually run through TRICARE. It's not through the USDA. So that is even just a little bit different. So familiarize yourself with what is available and where you can find that information, which again is going to be in the back, is going to have that income eligibility. And then you can also go to the website and get that information. Okay. Let's move on. Last way to stretch those dollars is reducing waste. So how you're storing your leftovers matters. I can't tell you the number of times I've gone in to get leftovers, warm up for lunch or for whatever. and it's like a big lasagna, a big pan of lasagna, and I'm scooping out like cold lasagna. It's just not attractive. And soup sort of gelatinizes once it sits. Like there's nothing appetizing about slurping up like a big glob of cold soup to warm up, right? So for me, for our family, we like to put things in the fridge in containers that are sort of individually portioned out. So that lasagna, I will go ahead and cut into, 3 or 4 containers. So then I can just pull out my one container and I can microwave it. Or I can pull out my 1 cup of soup and I can microwave that. Likewise, I could throw it in the freezer and now I'm just going to thaw out my one size or something like that. So not that that's a good fit for everybody, but if that's something you struggle with, think of the way that you're storing your leftovers. Are your leftovers something that you want to warm up in the oven or in the toaster oven? Well, rather than putting them in plastic and then putting them into a container that's, oven friendly, you can have glass like Pyrex containers that store your leftovers, and you can just put that container right into the fridge and then right into the oven. So think of how you're going to be storing them, how you're going to be warming them back up. Also, keeping your produce grab and go ready. So that means not necessarily that you're purchasing food that's ready to eat, like bag salads, which are a great option, or, apples, that sort of thing. But also when you're bringing home those strawberries, rinsing them and having them ready to eat, or having your carrots already peeled and cut up, or whatever fill in the blank produce is, if it's ready to eat in some form or fashion, even if you just get it ready the day before or a couple days at a time, that's going to make sure that you're using those items and that you aren't finding mystery bag of grapes from last month in the back of the crisper drawer in your fridge, right? That's going to help you make sure that you can see things, make sure that you have them ready to eat. And that's going to help your family also eat those items and ultimately stretch those dollars, because you're actually going to get a return on investment for what you've already purchased for those groceries. So make sure that you're having that food ready to eat in some form or fashion, those leftovers and that produce. Also, having grocery and meal planning. We touched on this a little bit already, but just having a plan of what you're going to be doing with your food, what you need to pick up for your house. I have a friend who's a whiz at cooking. She's amazing. She can just walk in the grocery store and that's not my experience. I need to have a plan. It doesn't always go according to plan. We might end up eating cereal, but I need to have a game plan before we go. And I found many families are like me. And one of the nice things about having a plan is it also eliminates that stress at 5 p.m. after a long day with the kids or a long day at work, where, okay, now I've got to also, use my brain space to figure out, like, what are we eating for dinner tonight? You don't have to do that. It's already been decided. Even if you have to move days around of, okay, well, we're not cooking that, we're going to do cereal. You've already done the work to do the deciding of the food and already purchased what you need for it. So it really makes those busy days a lot easier if you're doing that planning 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, whatever it looks like for your family, but just planning a little bit at a time, sitting down, taking a few minutes, and then, deciding, okay, this is what I need, and this is how we move forward. Which takes us to the start of our workshop. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about, yes, do I have that? Let me make sure that I have it. Yes, okay. We're going to talk about the basics of healthy eating. So I'm going to take my drink right here, make sure that my mouth is not getting dry, check the chat, and then we are going to move into the back half of this curriculum of what is the nutrition side of this. We talked of how to stretch those dollars in the grocery store and where to get resources, but what should we actually even be eating? So we'll take a look at that in just a minute. Wonderful. Okay. Basics of healthy eating. We're going to talk about how to simplify your meals and save money. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is my plate, this graphic. You'll see this on lots of things from the USDA. You can go to choosemyplate.gov and learn about the revision of the food guide pyramid. So if you remember, I'm probably aging myself here, but the old food pyramid that was like blocks that kind of linked together and stacked, and you were different food groups. And then they made a new one a couple of decades ago where it was like slices in a pyramid and they were colored differently, and it was just an awful visual aid. And now we have this one, which is actually physically a plate where you look at it and you can see, okay, half of a plate should be fruits and vegetables, half should be shared between your grain and your protein. And then you'll notice that dairy is listed off on the side or shown off on the side. And one of the nice things about that is this acknowledgement that many people have completely balanced and healthy eating patterns that don't include dairy. So it's not something that is required to have an adequate diet. Can it help? Can it make some of those nutrients easier? Absolutely. But is it required to have dairy in your eating plan? No. And you'll notice too that it says protein and grains. So maybe you're gluten-free, maybe you're not. Doesn't matter. It's still listed there as just whatever kind of grains you're eating, pasta, rice, breads, whatever it is, some kind of grain. And protein, whether it's fish or eggs or meat or none of the above, it's, vegetarian or vegan options. Those are all sources of protein. So just keeping that visual of, okay, when I'm looking at my plate at any given meal, what does it look like? Do I have these different components on it? And one of the great things about using the My Plate visual is it's not just each plate, each meal, but also your snacks. Are you just having an apple? Or are you going to have, say apple, which would be your fruit, and then like a piece of cheese, right? Are you getting 2 food groups in at most of your eating events, whether it's meals or snacks? And that helps give you this consistent pattern of getting adequate food and different nutrients so that you're putting pressure on, say, family dinner of, well, kids have been, living on goldfish all day and I have to get some real food into them. If you're having that balance through the whole day, through breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, then it takes the pressure off of having these Norman Rockwell perfect family dinners, right? We can be flexible with it. For my family, because we are a busy family, like most military families, we are pretty great about including fruits and vegetables in breakfast, lunch, and snacks throughout the day. And at dinner, we're much more relaxed. Tonight, my kids are downstairs watching a movie and eating pasta with sour cream and Parmesan cheese and ham in it. And it's delicious, and they aren't running in here onto the camera. So we'll call that a win, but I don't even feel bad about it because I know that they have adequately been eating this sort of pattern of my plate throughout the whole day. And it goes even above the day. You might have, we've got Veterans Day weekend coming up. We'll have a holiday, on a weekday. We're probably going to eat pizza and like go to Costco and have hot dogs for dinner. And I don't even feel bad about it because I know that our whole week has a pretty consistent routine. So that allows you to not have that guilt and to not have that shame and that worry of whether or not you're quote unquote doing good enough, because you know that you've got a regular pattern of how you're eating. So that's why I love this visual. It makes it easy to physically, envision your plate. Are you putting these different components on there at different parts of your day? This My Plate graphic is in Appendix E in your workbook, and Appendix F has hand-guided portions. Now, the reason those are back there, I am not a big fan of, say, portion control or limiting foods or anything like that. But what's really neat about these hand guides is it gives you a reference point of what is a serving of green salad? What is a serving of dairy? If you're getting, say, an orange juice, right? I've got a flavored water here, and you're getting a juice at the gas station or somewhere, an apple juice, and it's 16 ounces of juice. Well, go ahead and recognize that that's like 3 or 4 servings of juice. Is it one container? Is it one, all one serving? Sure, it is. But give yourself nutritional credit that, hey, this is more than one. And you can see that on nutrition facts labels. I've got, my sweet daughter brought me up a chocolate bar, and on the back is a little nutrition facts that shows me, okay, serving size is 5 squares. This is a pretty decent sized bar, and I'm imagining it's pretty rich. So I probably wouldn't eat more than, 5 squares, but I might eat 6 or 7 and then 6 or 7 the next time. So just knowing what that reference point is sort of gives you an idea of, okay, well, what is the expectation? Am I going to have more? Am I going to have less? Likewise, she brought me one that she so kindly brought home. Someone brought me a gift, and so she opened it for me, which is so great of my daughter to do. I would likely not eat this entire chocolate bar at once because I would get a stomach ache and probably feel pretty poorly. But I'm sure on there's a reference of what is that portion expected when they created the nutrition panel for it? What are they counting it as? But that doesn't mean that that's the limit, if that makes sense. So I don't want you to be confused with hand portions of, oh, well, this is the limit. No, it's just a reference point of what those servings look like when we say on your plate. Make sure you have a serving of fruit. Make sure you have at least this much. If you've got protein, make sure that a serving is at least this much. So that's where those hand portions come in. It's also a great reference point if you are looking to cut back on some of that grocery bill. Think of some of your more expensive grocery items. So it's typically going to be meat, fish, and fresh fruits and vegetables. Frozen and canned are really great options. We'll talk about that in a minute, but looking at where those most expensive grocery items are and then recognizing what the sort of the reference point is for that portion is going to give you an idea of where you can still be enjoying these foods that you like, but maybe saving some dollars along the way. So that is why those hand portions are back there. They are by no means put in there to limit anybody from any of their favorite foods. It's just another reference point to help you know how to make those decisions for your family. Okay, nutrition marketing. This is always one of my favorite parts of the workshop especially when we have a really big group, is hearing some of these buzzwords. Now, we all know that different companies market things different ways, right? We have maybe three major cell phone carriers in the United States, are the fastest network. But which one's actually best? It changes by location. So you have to be aware that they're cell phone companies, right, are marketing to you because they want your dollars. They want you to purchase their cell phone coverage. Nutrition and labels and food labels are the same. So you're going to see things. I'm wondering, there's quite a few chocolate bars my daughter brought up to me. This one's like milk chocolate made with whole hazelnuts, or milk chocolate hazelnut, like that kind of thing. But you'll see sometimes like organic or no added sugars or things like that. You see marketing terms on the front of the label to convince you to purchase that product. So educate yourself on what some of those buzzwords are. Common ones, I have them listed there in your workbook, are things like organic, keto friendly, paleo, low fat, no added sugar, no added fat, no salt, range free, cage free, antibiotic free, hormone free. I can't talk to you. No, not right now. I will talk to you in a couple of minutes. Okay, thank you. I'll talk to you. You can have my seconds. You can have thirds of my food. I've got a little one who is ready for more of her dinner, and she's asking me for extras. And this is just part of life as a military family. But when we're looking at nutrition marketing, you want to pick buzzwords and what is being put on there to make you purchase something. I saw once, like I think it was like cheese sticks or something, and it was like gluten-free. And gluten is a protein that's found in grains. So I looked at it, I was like, well, duh. Of course it's gluten-free. Grain in there. But those are things that, well, it's gluten-free. It's gluten-free, right? So be aware of what these marketing terms mean and where you want to vote with your dollars. So you'll see things like organic. Organic has to do with the agriculture style or the animal raising style, how the animals are treated, what they're fed, what medicines they receive. Same thing for crops, for how they're farmed, what pesticides are used. Pesticides are still used in organic farming. There's just a different kind. So be familiar with what of those things are really important to you, and then vote appropriately. So if it's really important to have a very small carbon footprint, for example, then those are going to be things you want to vote for. With something that you're not as concerned about, then feel confident and like, oh, I know what this word means on the front of this label. I'm not actually that worried about it, or that's not something that I can build into my budget. And then don't feel guilt about it. Don't feel shame about it. Just know that that's what that word means, and that's not something that you're shopping for. So again, familiarize yourself with those words. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about how to shop. And you'll see in your workbook that there is a table there of different types of foods. And the reason I bring these up is because there are different cuts of meat that are cheaper than their counterparts. I'm looking at the chat, making sure that I am not missing anything. Ooh, robot voice is very exciting. No, I've had it pop up on my end too, which we're not using the Wi-Fi, but I also do live in remote Alaska. So if you guys are getting a little bit of a robot voice, bear with us. I live out in the Alaskan bush. And sometimes that happens here. So that is why my children are not on the Wi-Fi, nor am I using anything else on the Wi-Fi. So we'll just move forward imperfectly and hope that it goes great. But back to looking at how to shop. So there are different cuts of meat that are going to be more affordable than others. And this is going to vary by where you live. So where I am, there's not a lot of cattle in Alaska. So it's very expensive to get beef because we're shipping it in. Now, I grew up in Nebraska. I also lived in Texas for a while. Ground beef or steaks were a lot more affordable because we were in an area that the supply was readily available. When I was in a warmer climate, produce was a lot cheaper than what I'm getting here in Alaska. So keep those things in mind that it might vary by region. But in general, these are a few different areas that I want to talk to you about really quickly. Now, pork shoulder is going to be, especially a bone-in pork shoulder, is going to be relatively affordable. Now, if you don't eat pork, this doesn't apply to you, but it's going to be one of the lowest meat options available. And it's one that is pretty easy to like put in a crock pot or to smoke or to just slow cook and get really tender and can feed a lot of people very affordably. So pork shoulder is a good option if you're really looking for a budget-friendly meat. Pork loin, a lot of the times you'll see a recipe called for a tenderloin. Well, pork loin is very similar. So looking into, there's lots of different cooking books you can get, or, you know, at this point you can learn lots of things online, but pulling up that information and being like, okay, how do, you know, hey, Alexa, how do I sub in a pork loin for a pork tenderloin? Or how do I sub in a bone in for boneless, right? Cooking time variation, that sort of thing. So just be aware that there are different cuts you can get. Now, chuck eye steak, I put this one in here specifically. Yes, I got my note. Chuck eye steak is one cut over from rib eye. So, you know, you hear rib eye. Chuck eye is one rib over, and it has similar fat and meat marbling ratio, similar flavor, similar texture, but because it's not rib eye, it's one rib over, one cut over, it's a lot more affordable. So being familiar with those kinds of things from, you know, back in the days of a neighborhood butcher, these are things we sort of lose touch with in a big food corporation system that we have, but being aware of where different meats come from is going to help you make the best choice for your budget and for your family. Chicken thighs are ones that my family buys a lot. They cook up very comparably to chicken breasts. They do have a little bit of a richer flavor and a different mouthfeel, and it's because there's more iron in those chicken thighs. That's why they're a darker color. There's higher amounts of hemoglobin. So those are going to be higher in iron and a little bit higher in fat, but it's still a very low fat meat and not something that, you know, would be like, oh, well, we can't have it because it's fattier. No, it's totally still a good option. If you're adding it into soups or casseroles or pastas, chicken thighs might be a way that you can save some of those dollars by buying chicken for your family if chicken thighs are something that you're willing to make that swap for. And then also beef brisket, really great option for looking for beef recipes. Brisket's going to be cheaper than other cuts of beef. And then fish is going to depend on what's in season, where you live. I grew up in Nebraska, which is not only landlocked, but every state it touches is also landlocked, in some ways like triple landlocked. So fish was not a big one for us growing up, but I now live in Alaska and I have a freezer full of halibut and salmon that we have self-caught. So again, that's going to vary by depending on where you live or what's in season. Other proteins to consider: eggs, plant proteins, all these other ones listed here, nuts and nut butters and dairy. These are all going to be more affordable than meat in general. Per serving, these are all going to be cheaper. Eggs are still an animal-based protein, so they are complete protein, and they will be the cheapest animal protein available every time. Think about even the fancy, you know, the fancy dozen of eggs is 12 eggs for, we'll go real expensive and say $8. I probably wouldn't buy $8 dozen eggs. I don't think I've ever seen them that expensive. Maybe $6. That still means we're talking 50 cents per serving for a whole egg like that. And I think eggs have between 8 to 10 grams of protein. So that is a really, really affordable protein. So again, keep that in mind. If you're looking for 3 servings of, say, ribeye versus 3 servings of egg, you're going to see a huge cost saving. So those are ways that you can maybe be bringing in protein into your family's eating plan. cheaper meats or cheaper protein options. Produce, you're going to want to look for things that are regional, seasonal, what grows in your area, what's on sale this part of the year. Getting fresh blueberries, say in February, or fresh cranberries in July, those are going to be harder, right? There's a reason that we see those seasonally in recipes and seasonally in sales. So when you pay attention to the sales, like we talked, you're going to notice when things are cheaper. It's going to give you an opportunity to have variety within your family, but also be able to save those dollars when you're buying what's in season. Right now in the fall would be things like gourds and pumpkins, and I think pears, that sort of thing will be what you'll see a lot of on that ad that pops up at your grocery store of what's on sale. You likely are not going to see a lot of like strawberries on sale or things like that, because that's not the season right now for much of the United States. Now, different sales, of course, pay attention to those. Farmers markets, oftentimes, especially if you live somewhere that can have them year round, but farmers markets, you're going to get sometimes things that are comparable in price to your local grocer, but they're also going to be fresher because they were grown down the street or in a nearby area, and they didn't have to ship, say, from Brazil to get to where it's being sold or where, you're going to be consuming it. So look for farmers markets. That's always a great way, if you have small children, to teach them about food and where food comes from and how it grows. Sometimes you have like a you pick farm, an apple orchard, or even going to a pumpkin patch, like talking about how the pumpkins grow and harvesting them yourself. Those are all opportunities to teach our kids about the food process. Ready to eat produce. This one is not necessarily a budget saver, but it is a sanity saver for sure. Getting those apple slices that are ready to cut, getting baby carrots you don't have to peel and cut up, getting things like oranges or bananas that don't really require a lot of prep, or getting bagged salads. That is one I love to put in there because that's just reality, that sometimes that makes life a lot easier. It helps us get in those fruits and veggies when I don't have to do a lot of work for it. And then also specifically, I want to talk about frozen and canned. Now, these get a bad rap of, oh, well, everything needs to be fresh all the time. And that's just not true. Frozen and canned have comparable nutrition to your fresh produce, to your fresh fruits and vegetables, and they are canned and or frozen at peak nutrition. Now, they're going to have a different texture. If you want like a really crunchy broccoli, you're not going to find that in canned or frozen. You might be able to roast it or air fry it to get some crunch back into it, but it's just not going to be the same. But if you're putting it, say, in broccoli cheesy rice or broccoli cheese soup, well, then, we're going to cook it soft anyway. Who cares if it starts a little soft? So these are ways that you can get that really great, adequate nutrition, save some dollars from the cost of what that fresh, produce would be, and still get good nutrition for your family. I will say canned typically has something added to make it stay safe on the shelf, right? So how can I take something that should be refrigerated or eaten quickly and put it on a shelf and have it stay good for a year? They either have to add acid or like through sugar, or they have to add salt. They have to add something that makes bacteria not want to grow in it. So if that's something you're trying to watch, say canned vegetables that have salt in them, you can just put them in a colander or leave them in the can and just rinse them. You can remove a lot of sugar and a lot of salt just by rinsing canned vegetables before you serve them. So if that's a concern for your family, is, the added sugar, added salt in canned vegetables, you can just rinse them off. And that's totally fine. That's still going to give you that really easy backup food to have at your house. I've got family in Florida. They're getting another hurricane this weekend. Like, having canned food is really important. So it definitely has its place, both within our budgets and within our families. And then that last box there is grains. The best grains nutritionally, where you're going to get your most bang for your buck, are going to be whole grains. So things like brown rice, whole wheat pasta, whole grain cereals or breads. But one of the things I love about grains is there's lots of nutrition in grains. There's lots of fiber, there's protein, lots of vitamins and minerals. They're relatively affordable. And you can stretch a meal by adding some form of grain or carbohydrate, right? Think about like a pound of ground beef. Well, what if you add veggies to it and breadcrumbs and potatoes and a few other things, and you sort of bake it up in a bread pan? Now you have a meatloaf, right? So what was just a pound of meat has now become like 3 pounds of meatloaf. That's using extenders. That's using things to stretch that food. Think about having a couple of chicken breasts that are maybe grilled up versus slicing up that chicken and then adding it in with some veggies over noodles or over rice, that's going to stretch that same food a lot longer. So grains are a great way, especially when you're using whole grains that are giving you lots of nutrition. That's a great way that you can stretch some of these meals and ultimately stretch those dollars. And on the bottom of your workbook, you'll see for milk and dairy, the only thing I put there is just to look for high protein options for milk. So things like cow milk, soy milk, or pea protein milk. Those are all going to have 8 grams of protein per serving. That's going to be how you know it's comparable across the board. Other things like rice milk, coconut milk, almond milk, those don't have the same nutrition. So are they still great for smoothies or cereal or overnight oats, that sort of thing? Sure. Yeah, they have their place if that's something you like, but don't think of it in your mind as nutritionally comparable to something like soy milk or cow's milk or pea protein milk. So just keep that in mind that, again, neither one is necessarily bad or good, but if you're looking for a protein source and really trying to get that good bang for your buck from a nutrition standpoint, you're going to want to choose a high protein milk option. Okay, let's go on to my next slide. Okay, now we are getting into the good stuff. Now, how to eat in. You'll see there in your workbook, it says notes and automations. I want you to just sort of brain dump as we're talking ideas to automate and save brain space and reduce stress. So things that we do, like in my family, for example, is, oh, I didn't mean to click on that. My apologies. We do Taco Tuesday. Every Tuesday, doesn't matter. It might be taco salad, taco soup, enchiladas, burritos, quesadillas. It could be chicken, could be beef, could be pork, could be fish, could be no meat, could be black bean. Don't know. All of those combos of soups and salads and tacos and enchiladas and quesadillas and a couple different protein options means that I can make Taco Tuesday 12 weeks in a row without really repeating a recipe, right? So that's something for us. I know that we love Mexican food. We do Taco Tuesdays. So I know every week something taco related on Tuesdays. Fridays are typically our easy night. So that's going to be pizza, or we're going to go to town because where I live, because I'm way out here in a small base, I have to go to town. It's a whole event. So we might go to town and go out to eat. Or when we lived closer to fast food, that would be a night that we would drive through, or we would have a sporting event, something like that, right? So knowing where you can automate, do you want to have a leftover night? Just making that easier for your brain so you're not constantly thinking the same thoughts over and over of, what do I eat today? What do I eat today? What do I eat today? Oh, I know that this is what we've got planned. This is how I can automate it. Outsourcing. And what I mean by outsourcing is outsourcing within your family. Is there another adult or an older child or younger child? Do you have someone else in the house who can help you do some of these tasks, who can help cut up veggies, or who can help load or unload the dishwasher? But some of this makes feeding our families feel so overwhelming is all the different steps of planning the groceries, getting the groceries, making the groceries, cleaning up after the groceries, making the food, cleaning up after the food, doing the dishes, fighting about the food. That's all a lot of brain work. So any time that you can outsource any of that, a lot of the times I'll have my kids, okay, guys, I have 3 kids. The 3 of you need to come up with a plan of one of the meals this week. Let me know what you guys want me to make this week. So now I've got a Taco Tuesday. I've got a night that we're going to eat out, and the kids are deciding one meal. That's already 3 of my 7 that are taken care of. That also goes into delegating. So what can you delegate that you can make somebody else be in charge of, that you can give away? Now, the part about delegating is you have to be willing to fully give it away. And this is hard for us as parents to say, let our kids load the dishwasher because they very clearly load it wrong. Is there a wrong way to load the dishwasher? That would be a great one to discuss amongst ourselves. But, in all reality, how can we give some of these tasks away to other people so that we're not the ones who are always in charge of it? And then having backup plans ready to go. So knowing what those go-to meals are, knowing for my family, in a lot of families, chicken nuggets and mac and cheese. So I pretty much always have chicken nuggets in my freezer and mac and cheese or the components to make it ready to go. We love little individual pizzas from Costco. We have those at all times. We almost always have rotisserie chicken cut up in the fridge, or we'll have, we love Mexican food. So we almost always have tortillas and a can of black beans. I can make black bean quesadillas, at the drop of a hat. So knowing what things my family eats well helps me have those backup plans for when the night goes crazy or the day goes crazy. I know what that backup plan is. I don't have to stress about it. I've already got it at the house. I have what I need for it, or I have it even in my brain. I know, oh, we eat this thing really well. I'll pick up that stuff on the way home. That's what we're doing tonight, right? So knowing your family meal plan. Now, that's what our next portion is here. And there's a spot in your workbook you'll see of, I want you guys to do some brain dumping, and you can go back to that later. What are some of those favorite foods? What are backup plans? What are things that you can make in a pinch, those quick meals for your family to help you automate some of this brain space and not have to think about it so much? Okay, 4-step meal planning method. I love this acronym, MEAL, M-E-A-L. The first part, when you're looking at planning out your meals, now remember, again, this is not meal prepping, this is just planning meals, is monitor the environment. And what that means is monitor just what's going on. What's your schedule? Like I already said, I am on solo parent ops this week. So how I fed my kids, like right now they're watching TV, eating pasta that I know they're not going to fight me on. That looks different than maybe how I would feed them on a night when we were all, our entire family and my spouse was home and we were all sitting down together. So being prepared for that, knowing that it's a sports night where kids have practices or different things that could lead into that family time or that dinner time or that breakfast time, just knowing about those things are going to help you. Knowing where your budget is, knowing what your schedule looks like, knowing who's going to be home for the meal. Those are things to just sort of monitor and have an idea of what you're working with. That second step is evaluate the inventory. So once you know sort of what you're working with on your schedule and maybe what nights you want to even be cooking, and I say nights as a generalization, of course, this goes for breakfast and lunch as well, but evaluate the inventory. What do you have in your fridge that you bought for last week and didn't cook? Those forgotten grapes in the crisper drawer, right? You would need to cook those, but what do you have that maybe needs to be at the front of this week's plan of, okay, I've already waited 4 or 5 days on that food item. That needs to be something we make tonight or tomorrow. What do you have that are your go-to items that you're always buying? Those snacks for the kids or those grab and go foods or, that protein that you love to have after workouts or whatever. What are those things that you need to be replenishing? What do you already have on hand that you need to be using up? This is something we all do very well when it's time to move is, okay, we call it like PCS chopped. Like, all right, well, we've got cornflakes and chicken and some mayo. What are we going to make? And by the way, you can coat the chicken in mayo, tenderize it a little bit, coat it in mayo, crush up your cornflakes, coat it in that and bake it. And it makes a really juicy chicken. That's why I use that because we've done that. So these are things that you learn. You can do the same thing anytime, especially when you're evaluating your inventory at your house. You are using things that you have already purchased or have been given to you, but things that aren't costing you more dollars. So when we're talking specifically about the budget with groceries, using what you already have is going to be a really great way to start. Third step there, assemble your plan. This is physically just putting your idea together of, okay, this night we have basketball practice and this night we're going to go to town and this is Taco Tuesday, and truly just writing down what each day or jotting on your phone or in a planner or, on a Post-it during, church or during a PTA meeting, whatever that looks like, but just actually coming up with that plan so that when you're getting your groceries, which is also part of assembling plan, getting your plan and then getting those supplies so that you can execute your plan, right? So come up with your plan and prepare for it. What do you need to be ready to move into the week? Then that last part is listen and be flexible. Pay attention to how the week is going. And if it's all hitting the fan, it might not be the night that you're going to stand there and stir a risotto. Like it just might not be. And that's okay, right? One of the tricky parts of feeding our families is feeling guilt. We worry so much if we're making the right decision. And then on the back end, we feel very guilty that we second guess ourselves, did we make the wrong decision, right? So listen to your family, pay attention to those unexpected expenses or those unexpected schedule changes or those unexpected behavior and mood changes, and be flexible, be willing to move things around as needed and say, well, I was supposed to cook that tonight and I didn't set out the meat. So guess we'll have that tomorrow. What can we make quickly tonight, right? So be flexible. And that's where having those backup plans on hand, it becomes really beneficial because you already have what you need to move forward without a panic or without relying on eating out or ordering in and spending those extra dollars on other foods. Okay, next page on your workbook. Okay, now how to eat out. One of the things I love about eating out is that I don't have to cook, but also I love this portion of this workshop because it talks about the reality that we're going to eat out. We're going to have food away from home, whether we've got school lunch. One way to stretch those dollars is by applying for free and reduced school lunch. It was free for 2 years through pandemic learning. Was it for 2 years or was it 1 year? I think it was 2 years. Maybe it was one. Not important. I digress. School lunch was included at least last year, I think the year before, and we didn't have to apply. Well, now they've gone back to the traditional system where you have to apply for free or reduced, but that is a way that you don't even have to worry about that meal. If you're getting free or reduced, that is a way that you know that your children, if they're school age or they go to a school, that they can be getting that. Now, private school or homeschool, or if your kids don't qualify, circumstances, but this is a great option for eating out, is letting your kids eat those options. If you're going out to, say, like a restaurant, when you're eating out, there's ways to eat out on purpose. There's ways to eat out on accident. And I would always recommend to anybody, eat out on purpose. Share items when you go out. Know that, hey, I really want nachos and nachos don't keep well. So can we share the nachos from the appetizer for our dinner? Or, hey, we really love appetizers. Let's get an appetizer instead of 2 meals. Let's share an appetizer and share a meal, right? So how can we make sure that we're not leaving overstuffed and uncomfortable and full and spending extra dollars when maybe ordering smaller items, ordering a la carte, sharing meals that can help us stretch those dollars and still have that experience of eating out. Now, hybrid meals, this third one down here, what I mean by hybrid meals is, and these are all things that you can write down that are not listed in your workbook. And these are just ideas. You can also be, brainstorming or sharing in the chat additional ideas you have. But hybrid meals are a mix of eating out and eating from home. So this would be, say, okay, we're going to go to the ballpark. I know we're going to have hot dogs for dinner, hot dogs and popcorn. Let me bring some squeezy applesauces and some cucumbers, and we're going to bring a couple of mandarin oranges, and that's going to be our dinner tonight. That would be what I would call a hybrid meal. It's part of the food is coming from home and part of the food is out to eat. There's lots of different ways you can do that. You can physically bring food with you, or you could eat before you go out, right? Maybe you're going to go somewhere and like, okay, we're eating late, or I'm not sure if I'll like the food. And you might eat at home so that either you're not spending as much when you're out or making sure that you're full before you go. If you have little ones, you might need to sort of pre-feed them dinner, knowing that they're probably going to reject whatever you're out to eat for, right? So, and I don't want to pay $9 for mac and cheese. So you can have these hybrid meals that can help you stretch your dollars and still enjoy this process of eating away from home. You can also make sure that you're choosing leftovers that keep well. Fish from a restaurant pretty much isn't going to rewarm well. Fish from anywhere is difficult to rewarm. So make sure that you're ordering items that either you'll be able to finish or that you know that it will keep well. I learned that French fries or tater tots, those kinds of things, those can be rewarmed in an air fryer really, really easily. So choose things that you know that you will be able to warm up. Excuse me, let me get a drink. Foods that you're going to be able to warm up later and actually eat, because there's nothing worse than bringing home food that you've paid more for at a restaurant than you would pay for a grocery store, right? You pay for the convenience of not making your meal, and it sits in that styrofoam container or that paper container in the fridge, and then in 8 days you find it back there and throw it away. Like, man. So choose foods that you know that you're going to eat leftover. That also means that if you've ordered a few things, okay, we have to take home something. Which of these is not going to keep well? Cool. Let's eat that item now and we'll take that one home. So just choose leftovers that you're actually going to eat, and then eat out on purpose. I don't cook shellfish. I'm from Nebraska. I don't cook shellfish. So if my husband wants shrimp scampi, that's a great thing for him to order when we go out to eat, because I'm not going to cook that at home. But also, I don't want to go out to eat and order my kids peanut butter and jelly. I could make that at home for you. Let's order something new, order something that we won't make at home or that it's really a luxury for us to get. And let's eat out on purpose so that we can fully enjoy the time with our people and enjoy this opportunity to eat out, to enjoy a new environment, and to not feel guilty about it or not worry that we're not eating healthy enough or that we're spending too many dollars, but be prepared and know how to eat out on purpose. Now, take home points that I want you to remember from this entire workshop. First one, have a plan. Have a plan for your budget, have a plan for your groceries, have a backup plan, or 2 or 5 or 7, but have a backup plan. Remember that healthy doesn't mean that it has to be expensive or fancy. It can be cheaper cuts of meat. It can be things like brown rice. It doesn't have to be quinoa. It doesn't need to be organic and sung lullabies to be a healthy food option, right? So it doesn't have to be fancy or expensive. Use your available resources. Talk to your financial counselors. Use those resources to help you learn about where food pantries are in your area. Those are listed in the back as well. That Appendix A, we've got lots of national resources listed. You've also got some civilian and government resources, and then locally available ones. I believe the workbook still has Norfolk, Virginia listed in there, but that's an example, but you can go to feedingamerica.org. You can look up your local food pantry. There's oftentimes like places like churches, or now that it's the holidays, nonprofits, soup kitchens. There's lots of ways that you can find extra food or extra dollars or financial counseling, that sort of thing. So use those resources that are available so that you can educate yourself without having that extra stress. And then lastly, recognize yourself as the expert for your family's wellness. You are the only one who knows all of the moving parts of the schedules and the budget and the military commitments and all of the different parts of your family. And ultimately, your wellness is not only, your size or your activity or your eating, but it's also your mental health, your financial health, your sense of purpose. All of those things come together for whole being wellness, and you are the only one who understands all of those different moving parts for all of the people of your family. So what works best for you and for your family's budget, for your family's wellness, might not look like other families, and that's not bad. Recognize that you are the expert for your family, and that ultimately you get to make those decisions with confidence because you know more that other people don't know. And then here on the last slide, which you will also find in your workbook, is how you can get in touch with us. You've also got emails from us where you got this workbook, from the registration for the workshop, all of that stuff together. You can find us at in-dependent.org, or you can email at info@independent.org, and we will be happy to answer any questions that you have. I will stop sharing my screen now so that you guys don't have to see that. And please let me know what questions you have. If you don't know them off the top of your head, you can always email those in, drop them in the chat, ask us later, and be sure that you are taking the survey at the end of this workshop. There will be a survey that I think we're going to drop it in the chat, but also it should be sent out in email to let us know that feedback. What did you like? What did you want to know more of? What would you like to be emailed about? What would you like us to include in the workshop? Because ultimately, the more that we get feedback from you guys, then the more we are able to provide that information and just make sure that we are supporting our local community. And we appreciate you guys being here for the workshop tonight. Thank you so much.